Texas Hold'em is Kinky Friedman's latest collection of essays about the Lone Star State. It includes humorous profiles of famous Texans and a look at how life in the state has changed in the last century. This is 20 Minutes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Barnes & Noble at Chelsea. If anyone's got a cell phone on you, if you could turn it off now or at least put it on the silent mode, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tonight I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Kinky Friedman. He's here tonight to discuss his new book, Texas Hold'em, how he was born in a major, died in the saddle, and came back as a horny toad. But first, just a few words from our special guest tonight, little Jewford.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the next governor of the great state of Texas, Kinky Friedman.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Kinky.
Thank you, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. As many of you know, this is not a political campaign at all. It's really a spiritual one. And as my spiritual advisor, Billy Joe Shaver, says, if you don't love Jesus, go to hell. Of course, we have a. Can you hear me back there? Okay, yeah. We have a number of campaign slogans, of course. Why the hell not? Suggested by Molly Ivins, who is very proud of that. Little contribution to the campaign. How hard could it be is one that I like. And then, of course, my personal favorite, if you elect me the first Jewish governor of Texas, I'll reduce the speed limits to 54.95. Does somebody have a copy of the book I can borrow here? The first disclaimer at the beginning, of course I didn't write this book. This was ghostwritten by Mary Higgins Clark. All my work is ghostwritten by Mary Higgins Clark. We'll get to this booger and do a little reading from it in a moment. I want to tell you a few things I stand for. I support gay marriage. I believe that they have every right to be just as miserable as the rest of us. Some of you are asking, how can you sign the petition? Is anybody here eligible to vote in Texas? Oh, great. Okay. All right. For your information, folks, the Iraqi election recently had a 58% eligible voters voted. When Jesse Ventura won in Minnesota, there were 65% of eligible voters voted. In the last Texas gubernatorial race, 29% of eligible voters voted, meaning 71% did not like the choice of plastic or paper, all right? And the men who died at the Alamo, Davy Crockett, who came to Texas to die, did not die so we could have a choice of empty suits and empty dresses. It's been 146 years since there's been an independent on the ballot in Texas. That was a guy named Sam Houston, 1859. So the political parties are monopolizing democracy. They're trying to suppress the vote. But when March comes around, our petition drive will start. It'll be a circus with a purpose. And you'll see everybody from Bob Dylan to Willie Nelson, the hillbilly Dalai Lama, I call him. Goldberg, the wrestler, right? Who's Ratzo's pal, he's coming down. Jesse Ventura will probably be down. Jesse, by the way, Jesse's victory was an inspiring thing. He believed the guy with the most money shouldn't always win. And the only problem with Jesse was he didn't realize that that wrestling is real and politics is fixed. That's all. He didn't know that. Anyway, we need 50,000 signatures, folks, all gathered within 2 months of the primaries in March '06. Anyone who votes in either primary is ineligible to sign the petition. So we ask you, save yourself for Kinky. Don't vote in the primaries. Once we're on that ballot, you're going to hear that loud Ross Perot sucking sound that he once described. But it won't be the manufacturing jobs going overseas. It'll be Democrats and Republicans coming over to our side. There will be no stopping us. And in November '06, when we win this thing, you're going to see blue bonnets springing up all over America. And those will be the blue bonnets of Texas independence. Now, people have asked me specific issues. I'm not going to get into any of that because I want to do a little reading from Texas Hold'em here in a moment. I'll tell you one plan. I'll tell you a couple of them. One is I'm going to be the first governor with a listed telephone number. I want to keep the customer satisfied. Another is I'm not happy that Texas is in a race for the bottom with Mississippi right now in education. We're 49th, and we're winning that race. So we're at the very bottom in education. We're first in executions. As Dr. Phil would say, how's that working for you? So the plan I want to tell you is about the border plan. Folks, I can't screw things up any worse than they already are, okay? There's no way I can. Friedman's just another word for nothing left to lose. And when you got nothing left to lose, you just might tell the truth. That could happen. The border plan, nobody's talking about the Texas border except Kinky Friedman and Bill O'Reilly. But it's a real serious problem. I want to reinstate the Bracero program in 1946 so Mexicans that want to work in Texas can get a legitimate green card and work there. I don't want to see any more human beings dying in the back of cargo container trucks on Texas soil. So the plan I have is very much cowboy logic, common sense. It was suggested to me by legendary Texas Ranger Joaquin Jackson. And the plan is this. It's called the 5 Mexican Generals, or the 5 Mexican Generals plan. The border is 679 miles. By the way, Jewford may well be the future First Lady of Texas. This could happen. He's a Jew and he drives a Ford. It's a little Jewford. He's wearing Elvis's shower curtain this evening. That's very attractive, Jewford. Now, I guess before I forget, I should mention the CD thing. He's got a new CD, which is actually an old. Do you want to just briefly tell the folks about that? He found it in his garage. It's called MAYHEM of Forethought. Well, tell him Jewford is the CEO of the record company.
That is correct. I am the CEO and president of Sphincter Records. Why do you laugh at me that way? The Sphincter motto is leaving our competitors behind. And we've got a new CD out on Sphincter, MAYHEM of Forethought. Found the master tapes in my garage, and it's a great, great CD that they're selling it here at Barnes & Noble. It's the only CD with a complete show of Kinky and the Texas Jew Boys from 1973. It's great. You should buy at least 3 copies each.
If you see me doing this, folks, it just means I support legalized gambling. All right? Very good job, Jewford.
Why, thank you.
Now back to the 5 Mexican Generals, the border plan. Here it is. There's 679 miles of border between Texas and Mexico. This is common sense, folks. It's cowboy logic. We divide it into 5 jurisdictions. We appoint a Mexican general to each jurisdiction. We give each Mexican general $1 million, which we hold for him in a bank account, from which every time we catch an illegal alien coming across through his jurisdiction, we withdraw $5,000. So I ran the 5 Mexican General plan by my Hispanic activists who are working in our campaign, just to see if they'd be offended, you know, or would think it was ridiculous. And to the man, they told me, you know, that's crazy enough that it just might work. So this is the kind of common sense thinking that we want to have. I always ask myself, WWWRD, what would Will Rogers do? And that's pretty much the way I proceed. I guess we could take some political questions, but why don't we do something that I think is real important, is to remember who brought us here in life. I mean, who's responsible for getting us as far as we are? And if it might have been our parents, it might have been, in my case it was. But the people we really want to honor and make proud. So that's what this piece is. I should probably mention that this book is illustrated by the great John Callahan, and he's got a cartoon. Well, he's got a bunch of great cartoons in here, but one of them that I like especially is the guy that's in the rectal pain clinic, and it's a big fat guy down on his knees and with his rear end up in the air, and the doctor is looking into his butt with a kind of a periscope device, and the doctor is saying, "You might not believe this, Mr. Smith, but they've built a new Starbucks up your ass." So this is the hummingbird man. You know, I'd really like to be able to walk around like a little Jewish mariachi. Will this mic come off? Do you think it's possible? No? All right, well, we won't start with that. A wise old man named Slim, who wore a paper rainbow bread cap, drank warm Jack's beer in infinite quantities, listened faithfully to the hapless Houston Astros on the radio, and washed dishes at our family's ranch, once told me something I've never forgotten. He said, "You're born alone and you die alone, so you might as well get used to it." It didn't mean much to me then, but over the years I've come to believe that old Slim might have been onto something. I live alone now in the lodge where my late parents once lived, and I'm getting used to it. Being a member of the orphan club is not so bad. Sooner or later, fate will pluck us all up by our pretty necks. If you have a family of your own, maybe you won't feel it quite as much. Or maybe you will. I'm married to the wind, and my children are my animals and the books I've written, and I love them all. I don't play favorites. But I miss my mom and dad. In the past 50 years, thousands of kids have known Uncle Tom and Aunt Min. They bought our ranch outside Medina in 1952, named it Echo Hill, and made it into a camp for boys and girls. Echo Hill will be open again this summer, and though the kids will ride horses, swim in the river, and explore the hills, they will not get to meet Uncle Tom and Aunt Min. My mother died in May 1985, just a few weeks before camp started, and my father died in August 2002, just a few weeks after camp was over. I can still see my mother at her desk, going over a cluttered clipboard with all the camp rosters and menus. I can see her at the Navajo campfire, at the big hoedown, at the friendship circle under the stars. I can see my dad wearing a blue pith helmet and waving to the kids in the charter buses. I can see him raising the flag in the morning, slicing the watermelon at picnic suppers, sitting in a lawn chair out in front of the lodge, talking patiently to a kid having problems with his bunkmates. If you saw him sitting quietly there, you'd think he was talking to one of his old friends. Many of those kids became just that. I don't know how many baby fawns ago it was, how many stray dogs and cats ago, or how many homesick kids ago, but 50 years is a long time in camp years. Yet time, as they say, is the money of love. And Tom and Min put a lot of all those things into Echo Hill. Most of their adult lives were given over to children, daddy longlegs, arrowheads, songs, and stars. They lived in a little green valley surrounded by gentle hills where the sky was as blue as the river. The waterfalls sparkled clear in the summer sun, and the campfire embers never really seemed to die. I was just a kid, but looking back, that's the way I remember it. But what I remember most of all are the hummingbirds. It might have been 1953 when my mother hung out the first hummingbird feeder on the front porch of the lodge. The grown-up outside world liked Ike that year and loved Lucy, and Hank Williams died, as did Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. I believe now that I might have been vaguely aware of these things occurring even back then, but it was those tiny, wondrous rainbows of flying color that really caught my eye. And those first few brave hummingbirds had come thousands of miles all the way from Mexico and Central America just to be with us at Echo Hill. Every year the hummers would make this long migration, arriving almost precisely on March 15th, the Ides of March. They would leave late in the summer, their departure usually depending upon how much fun they'd had at camp. For those first few years in the early 50s, the hummingbird population, as well as the number of campers, was fairly sparse. But as the green summers flashed by, more and more kids and hummingbirds came to Echo Hill. The hummingbirds nested every year in the same juniper tree next to the lodge. Decades later, after my mother's death, the tree began to die as well. Yet even when there were only a few branches left, the hummers continued to make that tree their summer home. Some of the staff thought the tree was an eyesore and more than once offered to cut it down, but Tom wouldn't hear of it. I think he regarded the hummingbirds as little pieces of my mother's soul. My father and I more or less took over the hummingbird program together in 1985. As time went by, we grew into the job. It was amazing how creatures so tiny could have such a profound influence on your peace of mind and the way you looked at the world. My father, of course, did many other things besides feeding the hummingbirds. I, unfortunately, did not. That was how I gradually came to be known as the Hummingbird Man of Echo Hill. Tom and I disagreed, sometimes almost violently, about the feeding methods for these fragile little creatures. He measured exactly 4 scoops of sugar and 2 drops of red food coloring into the water for each feeder. I eyeballed the whole process using much more sugar and blending many weird colors into the mix. Whatever our disagreements over methodology, the hummer population grew. This past summer, it registered more than 100 birds at happy hour. Tom confided to me that once, long ago, he mixed a little gin in with the hummer's formula, and they seemed to have a particularly lively happy hour. Min was not happy about it, however, and firmly put a stop to this practice. Now, on bright, cold mornings, I stand in front of the old lodge, squinting into the brittle hill country sunlight, hoping, I suppose, for an impossible glimpse of a hummingbird or of my mother or my father. They've all migrated far away, and the conventional wisdom is that only the hummingbirds are ever coming back. Yet I still see my mother hanging up that first feeder. The juniper tree blew down in a storm 2 winters ago, but the hummers have found other places to nest. One of them is in my heart. And I still see my dad sitting under the dead juniper tree. Only the tree doesn't seem dead, and neither does he. It takes a big man to sit there with a little hummingbird book, taking the time to talk to a group of small boys. He is telling them that there are more than 300 species of hummingbirds. They are the smallest of all birds, he says, and also the fastest. They're also, he tells the kids, the only birds who can fly backwards. The little boys seem very excited about the notion of flying backwards. They'd like to try that themselves, they say. So would I. Folks, I want to thank you very much for coming. It's been a financial pleasure. And may the God of your choice bless you. And little Jewford has, what do you have, Jewford? Some CDs, posters, bumper stickers, that sort of thing. And I'll be here as long as it takes. And reminding you folks, I'll sign anything but bad legislation. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. God bless you.
Kinky Friedman is a former country musician and Texas Monthly columnist. He's announced his intention to run for governor of Texas in 2006. For more information about his latest book, Texas Hold'em, visit the publisher at stmartins.com.